Welcome back, everybody, to version number 9 of the Golden Spiral series. Shane is in the waiting room, so we shall commence. Oh, before I let him in, um, second half of the show is available at patreon.com/snailshow. Okay? You're, you're sideways.
Let's see if I can. Oh, no, I guess I have to do this. I don't know if it'll stay that way. Let's hope it does. All right.
How you doing, Shane?
I am good, man. How are you?
Good. Tired. Manual
Yeah,
labor is tiring.
I feel you. I'm also tired. It's been a long day.
Did you just get off too?
No, I just had a bunch of other things I had to do today.
Okay.
Yeah, overscheduled.
Yep, I do the same thing. I actually lost one guest because I overbooked one Sunday and then he lost his he was upset. So I lost him.
Lost his interest to do it.
Yep, yep. Which was kind of odd to me because like nothing works here for the most part. You know, you have to try everything like 10,000 times, so I thought that would be understood, but you know.
Yeah, life. Some people, you know, get cranky just for the sake of getting cranky, I think.
Mhm. Um Yeah, but that's okay. The show fills itself up. I'm about to go on, try to fill up the next like 2 or 3 months because it all filled up within like a week after I said I was gonna do it to 2.5 or 3 months out. So I've been able to just kick back and wait for Sunday to appear and not put too much work and effort into the series, which is kind of unusual. Usually, it does require a little bit of legwork.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing. I mean, sometimes conversations just kind of have themselves too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
catch it on the right day.
Yep.
Sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot of pre-planning or pre-thought. I remember when I was doing a couple of the series there, there'd be days where I was just obsessed with it all day long. And I think I had gone over it so many times in my head that when I went to actually do it, it felt kind of like I had said it all already. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You could.
and and ended up leaving a bunch of stuff that I intended to say out because it in my own mind it was like a broken record, but forgot
Exactly.
that not everybody was hearing me say it in my mind all day long, right? So
Right. Well, that's kind of an interesting. I don't usually do that. I sometimes I come to the shows with some sort of. Excuse me, real quick. Eric, moving motorcycles outside. Sometimes I come to these with a little bit of pre-planning or topics, but for the most part, it's just off the cuff. And I didn't always do that. I didn't used to be like that. I used to sit there and worry about what I was going to say and worry about how other people were going to receive me and so on, but I kind of ditched that in favor of just letting it happen.
yeah,
I think there's merits to both ways. But the if you're planning it all beforehand, then you have to be able to somehow deliver in a way that doesn't sound scripted.
yeah. I never want to write it out like that because then I'll read it, right? And I don't want to do that. So
Right.
I don't know. It works sometimes, sometimes it doesn't. That's part of the beauty of it, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. So Shane, we don't know each other too well. I'm aware of you. You're aware of me. Um, can you share a little bit about you from the perspective of somebody who just doesn't know you like at all? I know a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason why I kind of became known in the alternative community would be the Ruiner blog that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And interviews that I proceeded to do after them. And then, I don't know, it's been a long time now. I think it's been like, it's getting on to 8, 9 years now. I can't even remember. Um, so yeah, a lot of different phases in the journey for me, and for a lot of different reasons, and kind of getting. I haven't really been doing it at all recently, other than having a talk with someone that I liked, like yourself.
Yeah.
I've always seen and liked your posts. I get where you're coming from, and yeah, so conversations like this I still like to have, but in terms of like putting information out there or trying to engage in the folklore that is the alternative community these days,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like to get into it too much. I have my days where I see things and they kind of irk me the wrong way, so I'll say something. But
It's a shit
yeah,
show, is it not? It's a big shit show.
well, it has become that, and by design, and I don't know, kind of inevitably so. I think
Mm-hmm.
when things are left unchecked for too long, they kind of have the ability to morph into something you didn't really want them to be. And I think that's what was happening here, and I don't think it was anyone's real, like, direct intention to make it get to this point where it was as much a business as it is a way to distribute truth and examine other concepts and ideas. But it definitely turned into that along the way for a lot of the kind of founding channels, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have people who see that as a opportunity, as opposed to treating this community with the respect that it kind of deserves, because it is such a fringe and it is already so marginalized that adding to the noise that makes it appear crazy is probably not the best way to approach it, if that's something that you value, right? But I guess if
Yeah.
your intention is to take something out of it more than give to it, then it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I sometimes I contemplate, because people are accused of being agents and whatnot all the time, right? So sometimes I contemplate how much of the so-called community actually is comprised of, somebody says, "Hey, I'm gonna give you such and so amount of dollars if you come in here and fuck with this community," and because it seems to me like odd. It doesn't seem. I can understand that that's possible, but it feels like, I don't know, almost like whatever everyone is doing, trying to share their honest opinion on what's going on in the world, are not maybe so incredibly special that they deserve like FBI agents and NASA people and whoever else like scrutinizing their every word. Like that's the part that kind of gets me, if that's even important enough.
Well, it's not, and it's something I've been kind of outspoken about all along, that people don't like hearing me say, is that they don't really care about the community as much as we think that they do. Like, they don't feel threatened by us at all, because in a way we kind of do the job for them of making it appear crazy, right? So,
Right.
um, and they, at worst, and this the money part of it, there are spiritual networks that have become TV channels, and along the way started bringing guests on and maybe coaching them a little bit on, we'll pay you a bunch of money to do these episodes of whatever a show is, and we have some ideas, and we'll let you know the ideas once we get going. So they listen to the person, and let the person kind of speak on their own for a bit, and then eventually that talk ends. So then the ideas come in, and to drive the entertainment value, drive the audience. And some people I've seen even like kind of completely rebrand themselves throughout their time, and just continue doing the same thing, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing if you're going to rebrand yourself and do something different, but if you're going to just come up with a new title or a new name for um, it every time you don't think it's working well enough for you, or you're not getting the money for it that you want, then
Well,
I don't know.
that's the tactics of, the enemy, so to speak, is whenever a corporation has a product that's failing, it doesn't replace the product. It doesn't make the product better. It repackages the name basically, and tries to shuffle under the rug the fact that there was ever an issue with it. It's kind of like it's an odd tactic to for me to comprehend, but I know that it happens a lot.
Well, that's kind of how all of it works in a way. Is like you can always get away with something for so long, right? Like this even applies to like part of the things that I said through the blog, like about cult sending and secret societies closing and being thrown under the bus and not having as much importance or need, or it's a whole different world with the internet because privacy isn't a thing anymore. It's very hard to maintain any level of privacy with the amount of technology that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And these people saw it coming, and so they knew that certain things were expendable, and they became expended. And a lot of different problems in the world, if you will, are kind of the result of that. But in terms of this part of the conversation, it's just kind of led to a lot of the information, a lot of the conversations that are being have or still being still repeating are kind of redundant at this point. Like it's almost like they've swept all of that under the rug so well that it doesn't matter what we dig up at this point in time. They're not using those avenues anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of run yourself up and down that street, but you're not going to find anything of value or that's going to incriminate them in any sort of way because they've stopped now, and they've moved on to other tactics. And that's all, these taking control of the technology as they slowly release it to us, which is a big topic in our lives in a lot of different ways, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the whole world event, if I don't know what word we want to put on that, if it starts with a PL or just a P. Um, you know, uh,
World events is fine. Are you talking about the current fiasco that's going on?
oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's got a lot to do with technology. It's almost
Yeah.
solely based on new
Yeah.
technology. So
Yeah, exactly. And like I'm always trying to find where the meeting point is between people who what we call NPCs. I know there are variations of those, but the people that don't think that anything's happening. Like where is the bridge between those people and people who are at the complete opposite side, that they're like, you guys understand that this is like an entire intentional restructuring at the very least.
yeah,
Where's the bridge? Is there a bridge, or is it literally essentially two breakaway societies that are sitting in the same geological footprint as each other, and you just like ignore each other like orbiting planets or something?
yeah. It's sort of like there's truth in every lie. And I remember when I started hearing this term "breakaway civilization" and certain elite jumping off the planet and stuff. I was kind of laughing because I was like, I don't think that's what I know that term, and I know that's a term that's been used, but I still believe that that breakaway civilization is more like us,
Mm-hmm.
the people who don't, want to follow the social conditioning and don't want to follow the authorities through the hoops that they're trying to make us jump through, and that's going to become, in quick order, kind of a breakaway civilization. There's so much programming of that I've noticed in the media, like new movies that have come out with that kind of theme to it,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. That I'm more and more sure every day, especially watching what's happening. Because like I live in Canada and things are a mess here. Right? It's
Mm.
not quite Australia yet, but we're on our way in a hurry.
What
And
what is it? Can you describe real quickly, like what exactly are the restrictions in Canada?
well, right now everything's kind of open, and the vaccines are not mandatory. Not mandatory. It's
Okay.
but slowly but surely they're cracking down on different businesses and making them mandatorily vaccinate their employees. Um, and I think in Ontario it starts on the 22nd of September. We have our vaccine passports in place, the COVID ID system that a lot of people have made a bunch of claims about it. It's stopped. Someone stopped it. the 0 hour Trump stuff. Um, but yeah, it starts here, just like it already has started in a couple different states in the U.S. On the 22nd, and yeah, kind of an interesting dynamic that I think that'll create in our our little world here. Remember being on the subway and not wearing a mask, and a guy giving me a very dirty look, and then talking to some transit officers, like their transit enforcement officers that were actually standing kind of next to me at the time, asking them why they weren't enforcing the rules. And they said, well, we are enforcing the rules. I'm like, well, how come there's not one of you at either end of this place making sure everyone's wearing a mask? Like, well, because some people have exemptions, and we can't, just be asking everybody if they have an exemption, right?
Right.
So the guy just kind of huffed and puffed and walked off. But then the officers actually turned and looked at me and smiled, as if like they wanted to show an understanding, And I think that it's a sign of what's kind of to come, is that it has kind of created a split in our society, and a lot of people are looking at it as a black and white issue. And not a lot of people are looking into the gray and maintaining compassion for people on the other side of the debate, and I don't think that that's going to get better before it gets worse, if you know what I mean.
As far as the polarity extremes?
Yeah. And I think that that's what, our warning, if you will, our language warning, our magic spell warning of breakaway civilization has always been about, eventually the split that we've always seen in society is going to become so wide and so drastic and so dramatic that people aren't necessarily going to be able to share the same room.
Right.
Or maybe they're not even going to be able to share the same cities. Maybe it's not, maybe it'll get a bit worse than that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought to consider, and maybe some of our listeners have not yet really fully considered this one thing, which seems simple, but maybe it's not. But just the thing that maybe it's not going to be an extinction level event or an end of the world event, and maybe it's just going to be the people that chose to get that jab they're going to be different, like way different, so different that maybe communication won't even be possible. And maybe it's not the doomsday scenario. Maybe it's just it's a diversion of paths, and they're going to go in a certain way and we're going to go in a certain way. Because the idea that somehow it's going to be an extinction level event that's planned, which is essentially mass murder / genocide, that idea in and of itself seems to me, although it looks kind of like that at first blush, it seems to me a little bit, if you're talking 5D chess or something like that, it seems a little bit of just a dumb move, like a blunder almost,
Yeah. I've never subscribed to the idea that that's what this is about, I've always had the understanding that they're not really as afraid of our population being high as they like to tell us that we are. It's almost like telling us that it's a problem so that we acknowledge it as a problem and maybe take our own personal steps to avert the problem or avoid the problem, but without actually having to kill off a bunch of us. And yeah, I'm starting to kind of see the evidence of it through listening to other venues of technology that's coming out. I still just think that this is about getting us ready, or getting our bodies a lot more ready to be adapting to new technology. I've used the idea of like an organ transplant being rejected by your body, and maybe things like finding compatible birth or blood types for parents when they're having a baby, things like that are done in order to circumvent your body rejecting certain types of injections, certain types of medicines, certain types of interventions, And when you start getting into the ballpark of cybernetics and putting actual augmentation onto a body, biology is going to want to start rejecting things. There's some stories I saw somewhere. I should maybe not even mention this because I can't remember the reference for it. But if you remember the RFID chips that people were getting,
Mm-hmm.
and their body's like pushing it out, you know, almost like a, I can't remember the name of those piercings that they do actually under the skin that just make it look like you have a little bump or some
Oh,
type of
like
shape under your skin.
subdermal or something like that.
Yeah, and like sometimes your body will start trying to push that out of you, right, and
Yeah.
start like basically combating the fact that it's got this foreign body in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of society has to do with conditioning us and social conditioning us for different ways of living. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
that would go along really well with new technologies that they're slowly but surely kind of dropping so fast that people can't even get like their mind wrapped around one before new ones kind of being, discussed a little bit more.
Yeah, right.
It's like you'll hear them say, "Oh, we figured out how to communicate with lucid dreamers." Oh, really? But nobody had time to go, "Oh, really?" Because they're also like, "Oh, and UFOs."
Right.
All right, and nobody had time to really go, "Oh, UFOs," because there's also this other thing going on in the world, right? And like we're pulling out of Afghanistan, and this is happening, and there's so much just kind of hitting
Mm-hmm.
almost on a beat. It's like
Mm-hmm.
almost on a beat. It's almost like they've got this like created this global heartbeat of like this adrenaline fear drip, that they're just hammering us with, and that's collective consciousness wise, collective creation, co-creative wise. That's not good. That's not a good place to have so many people's consciousness geared towards this
Well,
fear drip.
maybe because people tend to block at stuff that triggers the fear response. They tend to block it, compartmentalize it, isolate it, and then stick it over there on the other side of the mind, right? So maybe it's known that these technologies have existed probably for longer than any of us even know, and that they have to get released at some point, because even if you just take like a biblical reference that says everything that's hidden will be shown at some point. If you just take that in a general sense, secrets only last for so long, and if we have, you know, 100 technologies, each and every single one that will blow your mind if you haven't, done a little bit of digging, and they're like, well, we need to show these people this. How do we show them? Maybe the the fear propaganda stuff is not so much just because like the evil people don't like us or don't like the people, and they want to make them scared and trembly like little bunnies. Maybe it's that they want to initiate the fear response, and they know that the people are still going to internalize the information. It's just they're going to internalize it, seal it off, and stick it in the corner, and then their own mind will allow them to look at that little package that got delivered whenever like it knows they're capable of handling it. Maybe it's something more like that.
Well, it's very much like a handler situation where you kind of you beat up the subject, 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 and then you offer them the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So just imagine by the time they've kind of like through the drip feed, released enough different types of technology that then we could release something really big. Like, we have this new technology where everyone can have flying cars. There's like, like arbitrarily just something fun, but
Mm-hmm.
like something a little bit more. Like we could fix the world water problem. We
Mm-hmm.
just developed this technology that can create water out of air, and everybody can have clean water everywhere. It's a free technology. Everyone can have it. Just making stuff up here.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were to do that right after a nice long few years of, this fear drip, this constant abuse, more or less,
Mm-hmm.
it'll have a lot more of an impact in terms of making us dependent on that or dependent on stuff like that, dependent on these technologies. It'll make us more embracing of all the other technologies that could then come like a flood afterwards, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that like the illness is the way that it goes, but I think more the climate change aspect of what they're doing with the world, right? If the environment's at stake, I think humans will move in a hurry if they're scared enough, and
Mm-hmm. Are you
And
saying?
the technologies do exist. Like, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned, you know, them having technologies that are far advanced. Like I say that all the time. Like the first time I held an iPad, I was 4 years old, so that would have been 1984. You know, like it's that technology shouldn't have existed at that point in time, but it did, and it was very like minor technology to other stuff I saw not that long after that.
You held an iPad in
You know,
1984?
yeah,
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 as far as the public is concerned, I think iPads were released in like way early 2000s, something like that, like 2000,
something
2001.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, even with you know, various types of internet upgrades, I can remember that happening as a kid a long time ago. You know what I mean? And just in a different context of what I mean is as the technology was actually being developed years ago, as opposed to, you know, when it's being released, which is kind of now. And
Yeah.
that was what I spoke a lot about when I first came forward with the blog, and that's kind of been the drum that I've been beating ever since. Is that this is all about kind of erasing our humanity, if you will, like dehumanizing us and transhumanizing us all at the same time, kind of steering our evolution in a direction that they think is okay. I've never thought it was about depopulating. I think there's
Mm.
an element of depopulation that goes along with that other plan. That happens a little bit more, let's call it naturally, like they don't need to cause mass deaths.
Hmm.
But then again, in order to keep certain world events happening, you know, people are going to have to die in that way, but it still doesn't have to be like all of a sudden, you know, half the population or three-quarters of the population or four-fifths of the population are just gone. So
Right. Right. It seems unlikely anyway. I mean, even if you compare it to what you see outside, like there's not even enough gravestones in the three graveyards that exist in the city to like, and you never see anybody in there doing anything. It's almost like the population has been at some sort of stasis for a while, and maybe some people die here and there, and I know some people do die, but it's the I feel like the way that this place actually is compared with our formative memories, it's so far apart that you can't like when a thought comes up that's like, you know, you think about life itself. Oh, I'm born and then I have, you know, my life and then I die. Like even that very simple cycle, you need to reconsider every aspect of it and contrast it versus what you feel and what you could be curious about, because I know we create as we move as well, whether you're creating like objects, physical objects or not, or whether it's more of a subtle mental thing. We are responsible for what appears on the screen here. So like to be able to just take everything you got in your mind, the stuff that seems important to you, take it out, just tell yourself or just know that we have been lied to about everything, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how this place is. It's upside down. It's the upside down, right? And then just look at it. Just be like, well, if it's not what they say it is, like death. If death is not what they say it is, then what could it be? And then just like explore the possibilities of it.
I think even just exploring it is kind of a form of creating it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, from some point of view, it's got to be because the thought had to originate somewhere, and if you're having it, then it has to have some kind of baseline and some type of reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's always just a matter of being able to parse which reality you need to pay attention to the most in the moment, or in order to complete whatever your objectives are. Like, say, living a life. You know, it's really easy to let yourself go down rabbit holes all the time with information and things like that. But you know, if you're not doing anything with it, or if you're not, you know, still living life despite it, then you're kind of feeding it in a way you don't really intend to. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always good to make sure that you find that balance between the two.
Yeah, and me and Andrew were talking the other day about this community. I don't even like. I don't want to call it anything because it's just the community. Like it's the community where people at least attempt to share true feelings about stuff. We were talking about how there is not Maybe there was in the past. Maybe there was some sort of single coherent narrative, but at this moment in time, there's none. There is zero coherent worldview that includes everything that you've heard of, whether you put it in the "this is bullshit fiction nonsense" box or whether you put it in the "this is truth" box, or somewhere in between. There's not one single coherent narrative at all.
No.
And yet there there is still I don't know how to say it, but for me personally, it's because I don't know everything. Because like I'm not an AI supercomputer. I'm not the godhead in this form. Like I know I don't know everything, so therefore I have to have some way of sort of categorizing the worldview for my own use, and it comes back to more if something feels, if it feels right. It goes back to that whole gut feeling thing, rather than trying to use semantics and logic and reason, all of which are good things, but all of which are the weapons in this Alex Jones InfoWars world. They are the weapons, the words themselves. There's nothing else. There's no physical weapons. Guns don't mean anything. Atom bombs, maybe they do, but that's more of a standoff situation. Like, it's the words.
Yeah. It's the words and getting people on board with your words.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But then at the same time, even if you do manage to do that, if you want to do that, groups they get infiltrated not necessarily by an agent or something, mostly by the people themselves, but they don't work well, and it could only be possibly because there isn't any coherent narrative. So people they're what are they talking about? Like, what are you talking about? What are you basing your baseline? What are you basing your baseline off of? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's I think that I've been calling it a lore. It's like some whistleblowers came forward, some people started talking about things that they had experienced on YouTube, and a narrative was formed, right? Or several narratives began to form, if you will, and then I think what happens is like other people come along and they have maybe some similar experiences, maybe some similar type of memories, maybe some similar type of concepts and ideas floating around in their heads. And then they hear these narratives, and then they attach those ideas and those experiences and those memories to the narrative that's already established, and they kind of add it onto it, like almost like a snowball. They're building a snowman. It's like now you built like the torso. Now I'm going to put like the middle part. You've built the legs. Now I'm gonna build the torso or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else comes along a few years later and does the same thing. And I think that it's kind of like a compounded issue at this point, where that's been happening long enough that fuck, something like QAnon can happen, where it's like some dude who thinks it's fun to repeat some conspiracy theories he's read about, starts this mass phenomenon where everyone thinks that Donald Trump's fucking tweeting or messaging on this message board through a proxy, and they're gonna save everybody, and everyone's getting mass arrested and all that nonsense. And I don't know, I've been around this community long enough that I've heard different versions of that story, many times now. And
Mm-hmm.
so when it came to this one, I was just like, I kind of just wasn't having any of it. When people started asking, I'd be like, I'm not even going to look at this, because I can tell you right away what this is. This is literally just something that's going to look so bad in the end that being a conspiracy theorist could lead to you being a domestic terrorist, could lead to you being a criminal of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 100% right. That's exactly how it has ended. I don't know if you watched that HBO special that they did on it, or I don't even think it was a documentary that got sold to HBO. I think it's called QAnon Into the Storm.
Really? HBO did that?
Yeah.
What
And
was the spin?
It was all about the owners of, because all of QAnon's posts were through 8chan, right? It started on 4chan, I think, and then quickly moved over onto 8chan. I may be wrong in that, but it was definitely all on 8chan. And this documentary is all about the people who run 8chan. Like it's kind of part of it's about this fight between the original owner and the person he sold it to, and the guy's son, who the person he sold it to's son, who runs it more or less. He's like the admin guy there, and it was just like I was watching it, and I was just like, man, like it is just as simple as I thought it was, and it's really hard to deny by the time you get to the end of it. Like it does what any kind of miniseries will do, where it like kind of gets you thinking, oh, maybe it's this guy, maybe it's this guy, maybe it's this guy, maybe it's this guy, but it's being recorded over multiple years, and by the end of it, you can see through someone's behavior. I won't say who's, just to not throw out the total spoiler, but you can see through the person's behavior that it was them, right? Like that it was them who was doing it, and it's almost undeniable. And then they almost admit it, right? And to me, it's like I know that like a lot of people would want to say, oh, that's like some type of CIA plant documentary to try and like cover up the real QAnon and everything else, but I'm like it's just that simple, guys. Like it is really just that simple, that some person knows so much about this community and has heard us all talk so many times and has concocted their own little story and their own little drama, and now they're selling it. Like I've been pointing that out ever since I came forward, is that a lot of these stories are just that. It's like they listen to a lot of stuff and they wrap it around their own life story in some way, and then they put that back out. I mean, I do that when I write fiction. Like I take my own life and I put it into it, and it's twisted and it's reverted and it's fit into a category that I want to write towards, and then it goes out as a new story. And that's kind of what a lot of people, unfortunately, who have gotten a lot of attention in this community have done with their own personal story mixed with the lore that is constantly updating within this community.
It's a good point. It's kind of like, I don't know exactly how to approach the thing, because I know from the creative standpoint, everything is made up. Like it's made up. Like stuff is made up. You're made up. Your body's made up. Somebody made up the thing. Like it is, or maybe they didn't. Maybe it disappeared. I don't know. But at the very fundamental level, it's made up and it's passing. Like it's not the truth is not this ball of like fucking rock, in the middle of nowhere. It's a moving, undulating, permeable, malleable mass, and nobody even knows what it's made of. Maybe it's made of mind, but the idea that you're gonna dice it up into bits and name them, and somehow that's like the universe, it's absurd. Like so I get caught in that personal knowledge when I try to like contrast it with the people's notion of truth, because there is something that is like more true than something else. If it's like a memory that you have, if you've done something, it's in your memory, it's made up like everything, but it's your personal made up thing, so it has special relevance to you. So it's like, how do you contrast that? Which again, memories aren't that great. Like, yeah, I know what I did this morning, but it's not like set in stone. I'm like, yeah, I went to work and this happened and that happened, and I know for sure like it is a reality that happened, but it's not concise and sharp edges and very precise type of thing. It's not like that. So how do you take that and contrast it with people who speak out in the opposite way, or in the other way, which is when they say, anything about anything, QAnon, yada, 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 okay? Are they saying it thinking the thing that they said is this truth thing that's like hard edges and exactly definable, or are they thinking it's a made-up thing and it has special relevance to some people who are closer to the made-up thing and has less relevance to people who are further away from it? And you start from there, and you can kind of like... It's hard for me to figure out where to put myself, because there isn't any solid thing. And if there was a solid thing, then it would piss everybody off eventually, because they're like, why is this thing like stuck in my side? Everything's always moving.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the topic. Obviously, with the QAnon example, there's a bunch of different layers to that onion, so you could go anywhere. But I think at this point, like we've kind of exhausted, let's call it, sucking the truth out of, all of the ancient texts that we have available to us, all of the different streams of information that we've had available to us historically, correlating all of the things with, like, say, bloodlines and what people call the Illuminati, and mixing that with all the information that has, like, leaked out of the military over the years, and things, organizations like the CIAs and FBI's, and except with various world-changing events, like, say, a 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina, or pick a disaster.
The housing crisis in 2008.
Right. I just think that we've kind of figured that all out to a point where it's almost become irrelevant to our world, because everything that we are even still in some cases catching up on learning about their behavior and their plans and what they could and couldn't and would and wouldn't do, it's not even up for debate anymore, because it's actually happening in front of our face. For years people were saying that this disclosure was going to happen. Well, look at this world we're living in right now. It's actually the opposite of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's this total cleansing of palettes here and there, and erasures and cancellations, and, like, just cleaning the slate for this new world order type platform to take over things. And it's so blatantly obvious now that, like, a lot of the debate over what the truth is and who's got it is completely irrelevant. Like, we need to deal with what's going on right now.
Right. Exactly.
Like, it's here. Like, doesn't matter who was right, who was wrong, and who was telling the whatever. Like, what we can see is that, well, that was true, and that was true, and this is happening, and that did happen, and this looks like it's going to happen. And if we don't do something about that, then that's definitely going to happen. And maybe we turn our speculation into the reason or what the outcome of that is. But we can't keep fighting over whether or not it's happening, or try and make claims to say that it's not going to happen, because it is happening. And that's the one that's driving me the most, is the people telling me that they're somehow stopping things like this from happening in our world. It's like, no, you're not. You're talking on the internet while it's happening. Like, it is happening.
Yeah. Shane, can you hold that thought, and we could take a quick break. Maybe we can come back and discuss a little bit about, because this is what I always want to do when we have these discussions, because I don't talk to too many people whose mind can contemplate what's actually happening. And it's good to have these conversations, and for the people watching, in a practical way, because the things that, like, the thing that you just mentioned is essentially regular people versus, like, kindergartens that scratch and bite each other and, like, pull each other's hair and stuff like that. It's not a big thing. It's just like, don't be a jerk to each other. Know that not everybody knows, like, there's nobody that knows everything. A lot of us know a lot of things, but nobody has the whole picture. And why, like, just be civil, Yeah,
and that way we can actually deal with what's happening in front of us, instead of just fighting with each other about why it's happening, or if it's happening at all.
Yeah, exactly. Because there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are aware. There's a whole bunch of them. There are a whole bunch of people who have been quiet. The ones that have been loud, for the most part, seem to be somewhat compromised as a whole. And I think that's why a lot of people have stayed more on the quiet side, because they're waiting for the inevitable explosion, which is, like you said, currently happening. Like, we are in the explosion as it's, like, poofing us toward the volcano hole. And we're going to come flying out of the volcano hole, and then we're going to have to worry about the landing, Like, it's happening, just like you said.
Yep.
So we'll give it a 10-15 minutes. Is that okay? Break?
Sure.
Okay, cool. I'll give you a new link in 10 or 15 minutes.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, Shane.
Cool.